Sister Rainey, good morning. Shakira, Florida, yes. Wow, y'all are coming on over. Wow. Deacon Miller. Wow. On in. Yes, Sister Diane Wade. Glad to have you. Sister Brandon Miller, glad to have you. Sister Deborah Thomas. Thank you all for coming back over to be a part of U.B.U today. Typically, U.B.U is in person in our sanctuary, but today we've decided to do it virtually, so we're excited about that. So if you'll like, comment, and share, and invite others to be a part of our time together today. Sister Jerry, yes, welcome. Welcome to U.B.U. Anybody else that I might have missed? Sister Barlow is over. Thank you all so much. In 2 minutes, we're going to commence our time with Dr. Johnson. About 2 minutes, Brother Pete, I see you. We're going to yes, in a couple of minutes, we're going to start our time together. Thank you all for inviting others. Keisha, welcome over from the War Room this morning. All right. Well, we're so excited that we have this opportunity and privilege for our time of U.B.U. And this is our time with Dr. Johnson, who facilitates this time together. She is certainly qualified to share with us concerning this subject today. And so I'm going to allow her to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about herself before she starts today. For those of you who have not been a part of U.B.U in our sanctuary, but you're a part of our U.B.U virtually, we're going to give her this opportunity and privilege to share with you who she is and what she does, and then let her take this opportunity to share with you the topic at hand. So, Dr. Johnson, we appreciate you being with us today. And I want to give you this opportunity to introduce yourself and then to proceed with your presentation. So, Dr. Johnson, meet the U.B.U gathering and those also who are part of More Than Conquerors Nation and More Than Conquerors Church.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me again. Happy New Year to anyone who I haven't spoken to. Thank you again for being with us today. Before we get started, I will share with those of you who may not have participated in U.B.U or seen any other presentations that we've done. I am Erin Sher. I am a licensed professional counselor. I currently provide counseling services for children and adults at the Counseling Services of Atlanta and Sandy Springs. My specialties are depression, anxiety, and autism. However, I do offer other services for other concerns. Again, thank you guys for being here. Today, we've decided to tackle a topic that sometimes a lot of people stray away from covering, and that is grief. So I want to take some time today to just talk a little bit about what grief really is, as well as what are some things to look for when you're grieving, what are some things that you can do to cope with your grief. And then at the end, I also want to talk a little bit about how we can support others when they're grieving. So let's go ahead and get started. So I want to make sure that we discuss the different definitions of grief. A lot of times we think of grief as what we feel when someone passes away. However, I put these different definitions here because I think it's important to realize that grief can actually be a feeling that you feel anytime there is a sense of loss. So here are a couple of definitions, and then I'll give you some examples of times that you may be grieving or someone you know may be grieving. The first definition here says, grief is deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. And that's usually what we think of when we hear that someone is grieving. The next definition says it's a strong, sometimes overwhelming emotion for people. The next one says a natural reaction to loss. And then the last one says grief is emotional suffering you feel when something or someone you love is taken away. Let's talk about some examples of when a person may be grieving. So of course, the number one thing is death. Next, you may have divorce. When someone gets a divorce, they're experiencing intense emotions because of the loss in their relationship or their family dynamics. Which brings us to the next one, is change in relationships. You can also grieve if you lose a friendship, or maybe you leave a job, or you leave a place where you've spent much time and you're having to adapt to the new surroundings or the new people. We also have health changes. And I do want to point out that the pandemic has caused many people grief. Even if you haven't lost anyone due to the coronavirus, you may be grieving just the changes that the pandemic has brought upon us, meaning we're not able to join with our loved ones as much anymore, or we may not be able to participate in sports or anything that has changed due to the social distance or social isolation. So a lot of people have experienced grief during these last couple of years of the pandemic. We also have relocation. So anytime there's a change in location, whether it be moving to a new neighborhood or a new city or a new state, or even the next one says a job change. And then the last one is transition. So transitions can be anything that changes. Sometimes children may grieve when they leave a school and go to another one. Or again, anything that causes a difference or causes a change within your everyday life. So let's get a little bit deeper into grief and some symptoms of grief, as well as ways to cope with grief. And as we're going through these slides, please feel free to jot down some questions or make note of questions that you may have, because we will, at the end of our session, have some time for questions and answers. So make sure you're jotting down some notes as well as some questions that you may want to share. So what are some different symptoms of grief? So of course, the most obvious one is sadness. You also may have some confusion. You may not be able to think as clearly as you once were because of the overwhelming feeling that you may have. Blame. Sometimes when we're grieving, we may look for someone or something to blame to be the cause of our loss. Stress. Again, trouble with concentration, which goes hand in hand with the confusion. Sometimes when people are grieving, they may lose weight or they may gain weight, or they may have trouble sleeping. Sometimes people may have trouble falling asleep. Some people may have trouble staying asleep, or you may even sleep too much during your time of grief. Crying spells. You may isolate yourself from others because you may not want them to know how you're feeling, or you may just not want to be around anyone. Anxiety is another symptom of grief. A lot of times we may not realize that when we're grieving, it puts us in this state of fight or flight, where because of the loss and because of how heavy the loss is, we may actually start being overwhelmed by small things, or we may be constantly worried that something else is going to happen to us or happen around us. Stomach issues. You may have trouble digesting food. Also, breathing difficulties, loss of interest. You may not be interested in the things that you were once interested in, meaning whether it be activities, maybe just your hobbies that you once enjoyed. You just don't seem to have the same level of enjoyment. And then the last one is numbness. Now, considering everything else on this list, all of the other things are things that you can definitely feel. However, there are some times when you're grieving that you absolutely feel nothing. Your body completely shuts down. So we have to be mindful of all of these symptoms, not only within ourselves, but it's also important to make sure that we recognize when others are grieving. So let's go to the next slide. So in counseling, or in the psychology field, we often talk about the 5 stages of grief. And these are considered the 5 stages that people may go through when they've suffered a loss. It's important to know that you may not experience all 5 stages, or there's no particular order in terms of how you may experience these stages. However, most people typically do go through all 5, or they may go through them in this particular order. It all just depends on the loss itself. So the first stage we have here is denial. Then you have anger. Then you have bargaining. The next stage is depression. And then this last stage is acceptance. So I want to kind of talk about what happens within each of these stages. And it's important to know, again, that you may not experience all 5 of these stages. You may experience 1 or 2, but the ultimate goal is to get to that last stage, which is acceptance. So let's take a look at the different stages a little bit more in detail. Let's go to the next slide. So in the denial stage, this is usually a defense mechanism tactic, meaning this is usually what happens for most people, maybe at the beginning of the loss. And this is where there's a state of shock. There's a state of maybe even a little bit of confusion. And also, sometimes people go into this stage to protect themselves from actually feeling the depth of the loss. Anger. So this is where people question things. Why me? Why would this happen to me? Why would this happen to my family? Why would this happen to other people? And then this is also where the blame game is played. Usually when we suffer loss, sometimes it's easy for us to find someone to blame or find something to blame. You have the bargaining stage. So this is where people enter the what if stage. What if I had just done things this way? Maybe this could have been avoided. What if this had not happened? Would I still be here? And then sometimes there's a negotiation there where if you're suffering from, let's say, a divorce, this is where people may say, well, I promised to do this, so let's not get divorced. Or what if I do this? Will you still want to leave, or will you still want to change things? The depression stage is about emptiness. So this is where there's a deep sadness. This is where people start to really come to terms with their loss. They come to terms with how they're feeling. They come to terms with what exactly has changed in their life. And this is where the crying spells or even the numbness comes in, where they literally just feel empty or they feel that there's not much hope or positivity in their lives. And the last stage here is acceptance. And this is the goal when you're grieving. And it's important to know that acceptance does not mean that you no longer care or that you're no longer hurt. In fact, it really means that you've accepted, you know what, this really does hurt, but I'll be okay. I'll be able to manage through. So this is where people typically recognize that there will be good moments and there will be bad moments. So acceptance is the place that we're aiming to get. And I do want to point out that we can be in the acceptance stage, but then something can happen, or maybe the anniversary date of the loss of your loved one comes around, or their birthday or a holiday, and you may typically go back into some of the other stages. Again, this is why this is called the grief cycle, because you can go from one stage to the other. But again, you want to be in the acceptance stage more so than the other stages. So let's go into how to cope with the grief or how to deal with your grief. So the first one says, feel your feelings. Feel your feelings. I always tell my clients with anything, allow yourself to feel exactly how you feel. There's no reason to ever downplay your feelings or to ignore your feelings, because if you do, they're only going to come back in a stronger way. So it's important that you allow yourself to feel whatever or exactly how you feel. Give yourself time and permission to grieve. A lot of times we're so busy that we think, well, I don't have time to sit and think about how I feel. I don't have time to figure out what I'm feeling. No, you want to give yourself time and permission, because if you don't, you'll be forced to at some point anyway. Cherish the memories. And this is true for whether it's the loss of a loved one through death, a relationship change, relocation, with anything. Cherish the memories that you had with that particular person or with that particular situation. You also have to believe that things will get easier. I know a lot of times when we're starting out with grief, we feel as if things will never get better. But we have to believe that at some point things will get better, and we have to make sure that we take things one day at a time, or even, as sometimes I like to say it, one moment at a time. Participate in creative grieving. And what I mean by creative grieving, it's okay to set aside or to do things to remember the memory of your loved one by doing something creative, whether it be journaling or writing or painting, drawing pictures. It could be making a playlist of songs that remind you of that person. Creativity is helpful when it comes to grief because you get to decide how you want to grieve in that moment. The next one, do something in memory of your loved one. Do something that they once enjoyed, or do something that you really love doing with them, or that you know that they love doing. And you want to make sure that eventually you maintain your routine. I always tell people, of course, in the beginning it's difficult, but however, at some point you want to slowly start to get back into your regular routine to establish some form of normalcy in your life. When you're grieving, it's important that you make sure that you're sleeping as much as possible, that you're eating healthy, that you're exercising. These are all things that helps with just the different chemicals that are flowing throughout your body to make sure that you're giving your body, your mind, and your heart the space to actually help you deal with the grief in a healthy way. Let's talk about some personal priorities that you should be focusing on when you're grieving. The first one is to be patient with yourself. I often have people tell me sometimes, one time I did a grief group, and just about everybody in the group had lost a loved one within the past 10 years or more. And one of the questions that one of the ladies asked, she said, well, shouldn't I be over this by now? No, absolutely not. Grief is not something that you get over. And we'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end, but you have to be patient with yourself. Don't try and rush the process. Again, feel how you feel. Allow yourself to feel whatever that may be. The next one is to treat yourself to something you enjoy. You want to make sure that you're practicing self-care. You want to make sure that the grief is not consuming every single second. If there's a moment where you can find something or do something that you know you enjoy, you want to take advantage of it. Self-care is extremely important all the time, but it's especially important during the time of grief. Postpone any important decisions. At the height of your grief, you want to make sure that you're not making rush decisions or you're making decisions that aren't necessarily ones that you would make if you weren't grieving. So it's best to postpone them until you feel as if you're in a better space. And then last but not least, which I know I've said it before, but set aside time to process your feelings. Feel how you feel. Set aside time to process your feelings. You have to make sure that you're not running away from them. Because again, if you're running away from them, you won't be able to hide very long. Let's talk about support. And we're going to get to some questions in just a second. You want to make sure that you surround yourself with people who actually care about your process and how you're feeling. You want to make sure that you're around people who are willing to listen to you. Ask for help and support when needed. A lot of people go into isolation when they're grieving, but it's so important that you have people around you that you can ask for help, that you can ask for support. And you want to make sure that you're not surrounding yourself with negative people who do not understand your pain or they don't want to acknowledge it. I've had people before to say things like, well, I tried talking to my mom about it, but she told me she was tired of hearing it. Or I tried talking to my friend about it, but they don't seem to understand. So you want to make sure that you're with people who are not allowing you or making you feel as if you're grieving too much or that you should be over whatever it is that you're going through. This one is important. It says helping others will help you. So sometimes in the height of your grief, it's okay to do things to help other people feel happy or to help other people feel as if you're doing something to lift their spirits. So sometimes lifting the spirits of other people will actually help you lift your own spirits. Seek counseling if needed. Of course, grief is a natural process. And of course, I'm not saying that everyone who grieves is in need of counseling, but I will say that I think that counseling can be extremely helpful for anyone who does grieve. So here are a few little things to look out for when you're grieving that may suggest that you need to seek some type of mental health or professional mental health needs. The first one is you aren't able to resume daily activities after a period of bereavement. So maybe you've been grieving for a while and you realize that you're no longer eating. You're no longer able to work. You're no longer able to concentrate. Or you find yourself coping with unhealthy behaviors, whether it be drugs or alcohol, or taking action in anything that would be considered risky or abnormal for you. And then, of course, the most telltale sign is you're becoming suicidal. If you're becoming suicidal, you definitely want to seek help. You definitely want to seek professional counseling or psychiatric help. You want to make sure that you're talking with trained professionals to help you get through this period. And this last thing here is something I said a little bit earlier, and it's so important because we need to make sure that we are aware. You cannot cure grief. So grief is not something that we wake up and we realize, oh, I'm cured, everything's fine. No, you learn coping skills to help you manage the grief that you're feeling. You learn coping skills to help you deal with it in a healthy way. It's not something that just goes away. Which brings me to this last slide here, which is a quote about grief that I think is so profound. And I think that it would be helpful in terms of just helping us to realize the power of grief and what we should be expecting. And it says, the reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You'll learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you have suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same, nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. So, of course, this is speaking in terms of death, but there are some other losses that you can have that this could apply to. So, it's so important to know we're not looking to get rid of the grief. We're actually looking for ways that you can, as it states, rebuild yourself around that loss, around what it is that you're feeling, or around just not only dealing with the loss of that person or thing, but also recognizing or cherishing the memories or taking the lessons that you may have gotten from the loss. So the grief stays a part of you. It is a part of you, but you want to make sure that you're taking the time to deal with how it may have changed you or how it's affecting you. And now I want to take some time and answer any questions that you may have about grief, or about anything that was talked about today.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Yeah. Move. Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay. There are some questions that I see that our listeners and that have come from our audience.
Okay.
And one of them, and first of all, let me say thank you for sharing with us concerning grief. I think that this is something that we all, those of us who've had anything to grieve concerning, this is certainly a benefit to us. And it is a subject that I believe that if you're living and breathing, all of us have experienced grief. And I think that is something that we will probably undoubtedly experience again. But one of the questions that was formed by someone from our audience is this: but what happens? And let me state it very clearly here. But what happens when you're being a support for people grieving, and you're grieving yourself and trying to move through the stages of grief, but they still remain stuck in stage 2, blaming, anger, and then the latter part of it, how do you not feel guilty for disconnecting from them to save yourself?
I think that's a great question, just because when you are grieving, especially the loss of a loved one, of course, the people around you are also dealing with that loss as well. When it comes to not feeling guilty or disconnecting yourself from them to save yourself, it's important to make sure that if there is someone that you feel is stuck and it's affecting you and your grief journey, you want to take a step back. And you can take a step back with love. And what I mean by that is you can continue to let that person know if they want to talk about it or if they want to process the grief with you, then you're there. But if you feel as if they're not at a point where they're willing to talk about it or they're not willing to meet you where you are, it's okay to accept that, because not everybody is going to be at the same stage, even when they're dealing with the same loss, because of course, loss affects us each differently. None of us have the exact same pattern of grief. And none of us have the exact same response to grief either. So we have to respect not only that they're in a different stage or they're dealing with it differently, but you also have to respect your own process. And if you feel that helping them in the ways that you've been helping them is hurting you, you want to take a step back, but also just leave that door open that whenever they're wanting to meet you where you are, or if they're wanting to talk about it in a different way, that you're there.
Okay. Thank you. There's another question that also comes from someone from our listening audience is, what's the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist? And how do you know which one to seek assistance from?
Thank you for that question. So a psychiatrist is someone who deals with, of course, mental health, but they prescribe medication. So a psychologist is someone who offers talk therapy or assessments, and they do not prescribe medication. So a lot of people actually see both. They see a psychologist and they see a psychiatrist because they may be dealing with chemical imbalances where they need medication, and they also want to do talk therapy or get assessments done so that they can do, I guess, more help with coping skills or dealing with any type of concerns that are affecting their day-to-day life. So again, a psychiatrist prescribes medication, but a psychologist does not. And you can, if you're talking to a psychiatrist first, you can ask that psychiatrist if they're recommending counseling or if they're recommending that you see a psychologist, as well as vice versa. You can be seeing a counselor, and that counselor will be able to help you figure out if you're in need of psychiatric medication.
Very good. Thank you. And another question is this. How do you know when you need to seek counseling for grief? How do you know when you need to seek counseling for grief?
It's important that if you start noticing that things are never getting back to the point where you can maintain your daily routine, or if you recognize that you are feeling suicidal or you are thinking about not only harming yourself or harming someone else, or if you just simply cannot maintain what we would consider the normal day-to-day life while you're grieving, it's important to seek counseling at that time. Or not just counseling, but maybe you do need to see a psychiatrist to help you. Or maybe you are needing some form of testing to see what your needs are. So the key there is recognizing that you're grieving and you're just not able to get through the day in a way that you're able to function properly.
Okay. Thank you. And there's another question that comes from our audience, and that is, should you talk to a counselor that specializes in grief, or can you talk to any counselor?
That's a great question. I always recommend working with a counselor who has dealt with grief before. And what I mean by dealt with grief, that has done grief counseling, where they're trained to deal with grief. And the reason I say that is because not every counselor is comfortable working with people who are grieving, whether that be a personal reason because they have trouble working through their own grief, or if they simply just don't know how to offer the proper treatment plan for someone who's grieving. So I would always, if you're seeking counseling, it's important that you ask the person that you're potentially going to be seeing if they've dealt with grief counseling or if they offer grief counseling. Because not every counselor will be able to, or not every counselor will be comfortable doing so.
Okay. I think this is a good one, and I think we've had this before, and this is always one of those questions. One of the persons from our audience talked about those of us who are from the African American community typically and generally run away from anything that has to do with counseling or therapy, and especially when you talk about mental health and mental therapy, of course. And I want you to address that, but then that same person has a question concerning what do you say to people um, uh, that say if you have faith, you don't need therapy. So that's one of those things we've heard before, and I think it goes hand in hand when you start talking about the African American community when they ask this question. So I kind of group them together. So Dr. Johnson, if you'll speak to that.
My answer to that is always we have to look at counseling the same way that we look at any other health condition, meaning when we get sick, physically sick, we go to a doctor because they're trained professionals to help us get well. So we have to look at counseling or counselors the same way. Just as we have physical health, we also have mental health. So therefore, if something is not helping, not working for us, or something is not clicking, and what I mean by clicking is we're not functioning properly, we're having trouble understanding things, or we're having trouble with how we're feeling and functioning, it's okay to see a therapist, a counselor. And it's also important to know for people who may say, well, I have faith, so I don't need counseling, or I have Jesus, I don't need counseling. But my answer to that is counseling was created by God. Counseling was created just as every other helping profession was created. So therefore, I like to say that, God wants us to seek the help that he gives us. And I think that he provides that help through people. And some of those people are trained professionals that can help you deal with the everyday stress or deal with the difficult emotions. So we just kind of have to recognize or realize that there's no shame in needing help in any way. We don't shame people for going to the doctor when they're sick or going to the doctor if they break a bone or something. So therefore, we can't shame people for going to a therapist or a psychiatrist if they're needing mental health help. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Honestly, sometimes I like to say that it may be even more important because the way that you feel or the way that you experience life, it affects every part of you. I like to say also that your body is holistic, meaning your mind, your heart, all of your organs, everything works all together. So counseling is there to help you when you're struggling with things or matters of the heart or matters of the mind.
There's some other questions that are coming in. Dr. Johnson, let me ask this question, and then I'm going to get to some of the others. So if your question is out there, we're definitely going to do everything we can. We still have a little bit of time left in our time with Dr. Johnson. So please ask your question concerning grief to Dr. Johnson. The question I have is there a my mother died in 2004, and believe it or not, I was a mama's boy, and there were times when I look back after she passed away, I would think after some time passed, boy, I should really be over this by now. And then another year or a few years passed away, and I found myself still having those feelings of grief. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't say anything to anybody because I'm supposed to be further along than I am. My question to you, Dr. Johnson, is this: is there a time frame when we talk about grief? Is there a time frame for grief?
No, there's not a timeline for grief. Grief is a lifelong journey. It's a lifelong process. Of course, people think that there should be a time frame. They think that, well, it's been a year, it's been 15, 20 years. I should be able to deal with this. There is no time frame. However, I will say that there are times in the journey where your feelings are going to be a lot more heightened than others. And that could be when, the anniversary date comes around. It could be the holiday or your loved one's birthday, or it could be your birthday. It could be any time that you feel triggered. And what I mean by triggered is just having memories to come about, or having just times where you wish that you could call that person or that you could share things with that person. So it's a lifelong journey, and it goes back to giving yourself that grace, giving yourself that permission to experience those feelings. When you have a connection with someone, whether it be a parent or it could be a friend or another family member, that connection lives forever. So that person is always going to be a part of you. So there's no way that we can cut grief off, because that connection doesn't go away.
Wow.
So we have to remember that, not only for ourselves but other people. We have to make sure that we recognize that that connection will always be there. So there's always going to be some feelings of sadness or some feelings of emptiness that are there. So to answer that question, there is no time frame.
Wow. So then, is there any such thing as grieving too long?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
It's lifelong.
Okay. And another question we have is this: how do we recommend someone gets counseling for grief when we're seeing some warning signs of depression?
It may, depending on that person, it may be difficult because you're not sure how they're going to respond. But it's always best to recommend it. To say, I think it's, it would be good if you seek some counseling, or would you like for me to help you find someone if they agree to do so at that time? And it may be okay to, if you're in counseling yourself or if you've done some counseling, it's great to share your experience. A lot of times as people, we're more likely to want to do something or feel that it's okay to do something if we know that someone around us has done the same. You'll be surprised at people thinking that other people are not experiencing some of the same things. So if you share with them, hey, I've done counseling, or I'm in counseling, or my cousin did counseling and they said that it was great for them, maybe it's something that you should try. And not only offer that, but offer to help them find someone. I had a client the other day, and I thought this was awesome. He shared with me that his best friend had done counseling, and he recommended it to him. And he said, "Hey, let's look through a list of people and let's kind of rate them on how we feel about them, and let's see which one we end up with at the end." So that friend actually helped him go through that journey of finding someone. And sometimes we just have to be there for support to let people know that it's okay to seek help.
Okay, very good. Dr. Johnson, I know we have a few more questions, but I just want you to take this opportunity to tell again who you are in terms of your practice and what you do. If someone needs, have a desire to reach out to you, to contact you, just take this opportunity before we get into the next few questions. And let me say this, I didn't say it from the beginning, but Dr. Johnson is my biological niece, and I'm so happy to share the moments that we've been able to share when she relocated to our area. And I just think, there may be some biases there, but I think she's a fine mind and very bright, and certainly one to be sought after. So if you'll just go ahead and share with our listening audience who you are, how to get in touch with you, etc. I think that'd be very beneficial.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I just want to point out too that I am grateful for the experiences that we've been able to have as well. So thank you.
Good.
So again, I'm Erin Isha, and I currently offer both in-person and virtual sessions through the Counseling Services of Atlanta. If you would like to contact me about potential services, or if you just simply have questions, after this presentation, you can feel free to email me. That email is my first name .johnson@gmail.com. So that's ERINISHA JOHNSON@gmail.com. You can also type my name on the platform that's called Psychology Today. That will actually bring up more information about my practice, as well as just how to contact me for scheduling potential sessions. So again, that's if you type in on your search bar Psychology Today and type in my name, it should bring up more information. Or you can also type my name on Therapy for Black Girls, and you should see the same information that's on Psychology Today.
All right, thank you. And I know our team is going to get that information up for you all before we end our time together with Dr. Johnson. Again, I want to thank each of you for being a part of U.B.U outreach. And this is coming from support of our nonprofit arm, which I am president and founder and president of Lifewater Inc. And we certainly, our mission is bringing hope to humanity by connecting with our community. And this is one of the ways in which we decided that we wanted to connect with our community and offer times of just where we can sit down and talk to someone who can benefit us as relates to certain things that we have to overcome as we live this life. So again, thank you, Dr. Johnson. Thanks to all of you who are part of U.B.U today. The next question that we have is this: how can you distinguish between guilt and grief?
That's a great question. So guilt can be a part of grief, meaning when you're grieving, especially the loss of a loved one or a relationship or a change in a relationship, you may feel some guilt, meaning you may wish that you had done things a little bit differently, or you may wish that you had more time to spend with that person, or maybe you wish that you didn't have a certain conversation with that person. So guilt is a feeling that you may experience within your process of grief. It can actually be a part of the anger stage, or where you may find yourself angry at yourself about something that you did or that you didn't do. Or it even may be a part of the depression stage. But the key is even in that acceptance stage, that's where you want to come to peace with whatever that guilt may be. So again, they are different, however, they can be within the same process.
Thank you. The next question is, how do we help children who are grieving? Should we get them counseling?
It's absolutely great to get them counseling, especially if they're having trouble understanding, or if you start noticing some changes in their behaviors. The best way to help children when they're grieving is to make sure that you're allowing them the space to ask questions, or allowing them the space to actually talk about the loss. A lot of times children, even adults, may not know what to do with that grief. They don't know what to do or what to say. So it's important that you foster a healthy environment so that that child feels comfortable asking questions or sharing what it is that they may be feeling. And counseling can help children especially find just creative ways to deal with that grief, and to acknowledge the differences that they feel, or acknowledge just the loss that they are experiencing. So children, just as much as adults, can benefit from counseling when they're grieving.
Okay, and there's a few more questions, and then we end our time together. What do you do if you want to support someone that is grieving, but you don't know how to go about it?
The perfect question to ask when you don't know what to do is to simply ask, what do you need from me? Or how can I help you at this time? How can I help? Or what can I do to help you through this process? And when you don't know, just simply ask.
Very good. And then the next question we have time for, and two more, and we have them already. How do you, let me ask this one first, and then I'll ask this one to round us out. I'm going to ask, how do you find a counselor that fits in the end? But this is the one before that. Concerning pastors, what are ways he can utilize to take time for himself to feel those feelings? Sometimes pastors don't have time to just feel their feelings because of their responsibility.
It's so important, especially as pastors or anyone who serves the community or serves a group of people. And of course, we know pastors, they offer so much of their time to other people. So it's important that pastors, as well as anyone else who's in the helping profession, to take time for themselves. It's totally unselfish to set aside a specific time where you're focusing on your own needs or you're focusing on your own feelings. Because again, as we stated earlier, if you're not taking care of your feelings and your experiences, it's going to come out in some way. So it's best to set aside that self-care. I know we talked about self-care in a previous presentation, but self-care is extremely important and it's something that should be scheduled if needed. If it's impossible to have it regularly, you want to make sure that you set aside a specific time frame, whether it be every day, every week, as often as needed, to focus on yourself. It's okay to shut the world out for a little while to focus on your own needs and wants.
Okay, very good. And then this last question, perhaps, how do you find a counselor that fits?
That's also a great question. The best way to find a counselor that fits is, as I mentioned earlier, with and it's on the screen here, Psychology Today, Therapy for Black Girls. There are plenty of therapy directories, meaning you can get on and you can actually type in what you're looking for. Meaning, if you're looking for a grief counselor, you can actually type in grief in the search bar on a therapist directory, and you should be able to pull up the biography or more information about a counselor. You want to pay attention to what does this counselor specialize in, meaning can they actually help me with what I'm needing help with? You want to pay attention to, does this counselor have the credentials to help me with what I'm going through? What is the cost? Am I able to afford their services? Do they take insurance? Do they take self-pay? Can my job provide me with someone who can provide services? You want to look at finding a therapist just like you would dating or deciding on if you want to be friends with someone. You want to pay attention to, are they aligned with what you're looking for? And it's important to note that you may meet a counselor and you may realize that they're not the person for you, and that's okay. You want to keep going until you find that person that you feel comfortable with, the person that you trust in terms of their credentials, even also within their personality. Do your personalities mesh well together? Do you feel comfortable with that person? Do you feel as if you can trust that person? You just want to take the time and pay attention to the websites or the biographies that are up about that particular person. And then when you meet that person, ask some questions that you may have about their experience or about their approach to therapy. So it's all about just really taking the time to see if this person will be a good fit or not. And if they're not, just to keep going until you do find someone.
All right, excellent. Well, Dr. Johnson, we really, really want to let you know how much we appreciate and value what you've shared with us today. And of course, there are others who from the audience are also sharing those same sentiments of how appreciative they are of you. And I just want to show a few of them. And so if you all really, really was helped by Dr. Johnson's presentation, send a note of encouragement. Just put it in the comment section there. And well, there's a question. Uh, just having to put a question there. Would you recommend the counselor to be male for male or female for female, or does it matter? Just trying to relate it uh, as far as it is for the world, as the world is today.
I don't think it has to be a certain way. It's all about your personal needs. It's all about what you feel comfortable with. If you are a male and you would prefer another male counselor, that's fine. Or if you're a male and you prefer a female counselor, that's fine. It's all about what you feel comfortable with, or who you would feel comfortable sharing with, or working with. There's no set way, or there's no rule when it comes to that. It's all about your own preferences.
And I think Dr. Johnson, that question, and thank you, Reverend Foots, for sharing that. You know, from a church perspective, sometimes we put the church in such a huge funnel that many times limits the church, and that thought process comes from the church basis. In the normal scheme of things, it that's just not how it's seen. If a male counsels a female and that's the choice, then that's the choice. Or if it's a female with a male, that's the choice. It's only somehow that thought process creeps into the church that maybe a male shouldn't be counseling a female. And I think that's a lesson and perhaps a therapy choice for another day. But I appreciate you clarifying that. And Reverend Foots, thank you for asking that question. I think it was a good question to help bring clarity to perhaps how many people think concerning the church. It's just not how it is in corporate America or any other place other than that, how we put the church in that funnel. So let me show you, Dr. Johnson, some other people who are appreciating you today, saying thank you. This is well needed today. And also saying it was very, very informative. And so we really, really, really thank you for, and if you all will kind of put those comments there, we really, really thank you for being a part of U.B.U today. As a matter of fact, we expect to gather again, and now we're servicing ages 18 and above, but we also service the ages 12 to 17. And so those of you will be getting the subject matter and the date to you available. This is the community outreach. The church is just hosting U.B.U. Lifewater Inc. Is the one who helps provide this for our community. And so More Than Conquerors Church just have an opportunity to be a part of this venture and to partner with Lifewater. And so I want you all to get your 12-year-olds to 17-year-olds ready to join us on a date that we'll have for you. And so you'll be seeing promotional items, promotional flyers about this that is upcoming. So please get those 12 to 17-year-olds. There was one time we had together with a team, and it was scheduled for more, but talked about bullying and et cetera. So please, Dr. Johnson has so much to offer and ways to help us as relates to overcoming the challenges of life. And certainly our mental health is very, very, very important. Very, very, very important. So again, Dr. Johnson, we thank you. By church, I mean every individual, church community, any community can join us to be a part of what Dr. Johnson is doing. And so, yes, church community, the Atlanta community, when we do it virtually, any person who wants to be a part of this, as you can see, there's no cost associated with it. And Dr. Johnson is a professional who's come to share with us. And we thank God uh, for her being a part of the More Than Conquerors, but then certainly we thank God professionally being a part of U.B.U. So this is not just church. This is for people at large, and we certainly want to be a blessing to all. And again, that's the mission of Lifewater Inc. is bringing hope to humanity by connecting with our community. And so, because we are thrust in this COVID crisis to virtual means, then that means other communities outside of Georgia, we have Arizona, we have Illinois, we have California, and yes, Florida. Yes, the kids. The next one for the kids will be virtual. We're going to offer that for the kids, and that information will be out. And we certainly appreciate all the interest. And we're going to be bringing this to you in a more fine way as time presents itself. But we didn't wait until we had it all together to do it. We stepped out today to do it, and we hope that it was a benefit to you. But we hope that this would get, as they would say in this language, gooder and gooder. We hope it gets gooder and gooder, that it will be a benefit to all those who have an opportunity to chime in. Oh, New York. New York is in the house. We're in New York. There's no way, if we were just in our sanctuary today, no way we would be in New York and California and Arizona. Wow, we're just all out west. We're all up the East Coast, Florida. What a blessing it is to have this opportunity. And thank you all for chiming in and being a part of what God is doing. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson, for the understanding. It helped me a lot. I had 6 deaths in 9 months. Wow, 6 deaths in 9 months. And so it's definitely a benefit. And we're definitely thankful to and appreciative you, Dr. Johnson, for being a part of U.B.U. Outreach, sponsored by Lifewater Inc. All right, so as we prepare to sign off today, let me say thanks to everyone. So if our team would just put a big old thank you for up there for everyone to let them know how much we appreciate them being a part of U.B.U. And more communication will be given as relates to our next time out. Taisha McCoy, that's New York. Tisa Arnetta is from Arizona. And we just have so many folks being a part of what we're doing here. And we're just so thankful to you for that. And as we say, we're going to be bringing you different topics and subjects and et cetera. And we'll be letting you know what that is. Dr. Johnson has a wide range of things that she's qualified to share with us. And we'll be letting you know what the next topic will be. So as we sign off, remember this. This is U.B.U. We want you to be you. That's simply what it is. We want you to be you. And we're Lifewater Inc. And our mission is to bring hope to humanity by connecting with our community. So thank you for joining U.B.U. today. And we trust that this has been a benefit to you. Share with others concerning U.B.U. And there'll be more definite information for you to have to share with others about our times of coming together and what we're standing for. And U.B.U. started some years ago. It was birthed in my heart as a signature program for Lifewater Inc. And it was designed as a self-esteem program. And we have flyers that we was giving out and things that we were trying. It's probably been more than 5 years ago. And it's just coming into fruition now. We have a written curriculum for our youth as it relates to U.B.U. It started out as a youth self-esteem program, and there's a whole written curriculum for it that was designed specifically for Lifewater Inc. and for those youth that we'll be serving. And now we're kind of bridging the gap between our young people and those who are not, not so young, but that they could be a part of U.B.U outreach. So again, thank you for being a part of it. And Dr. Johnson, one more time before we sign off, just tell them again who you are and how to connect with you and any parting words, and then we'll sign off.
First, I just want to say thank you all so much for being here with us today. I do hope that it was helpful in some way. I'm looking forward to just continuing this relationship in terms of us just learning and growing together. Again, I can be contacted by email. It is on the screen here, where it's my first name dot last name at gmail.com. Or you're welcome to search for my name on Psychology Today or Therapy for Black Girls. And again, I do offer services for both children and adults. And I'm just excited about continuing this journey with everyone.
Thank you so much again. I am C.L. May. This is U.B.U Outreach, Lifewater Inc. Remember, our mission is to bring hope to humanity by connecting with our community. And then Lifewater, as you can see, you don't have to thirst because there's water for life. See you next time.